what a performance there by J King.
J King, full plot armor.
J King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J King is our world champion! J King 7! What? The back-to-back Kards world champion!
Hello guys, and welcome back to another video. Today it is time to talk about the World Championship for Kards 2025, and I've done a couple of videos talking about it already, going over the format, going over the absolute clown fiesta with that. I wanted to make a video about like my last second, shot at attempting to qualify, but unfortunately my computer crashed, or power went out and I couldn't record those games, but anyways, obviously it did not work out. But we have the format and the players for the top 16. So today I want to talk about some of those players, talk about a little bit about the format, but more importantly I want to talk about the players who are not going to be attending, the players who are not in the top 16 of the World Championship, but players who deserve a fair shout out that they are not really getting. So that's going to be the purpose of this video. I have a bit of a slideshow. I have a couple other things I will be showing. And starting off on this first screen here, you can see there is just the art for the World Championship article that 1939 created. And you can actually see down here, it's probably pretty hard to make out on the video, but it has the 1939 logo on all of these, like these hangars with the planes. With all of these people with luggage walking towards the planes. This would be much, much more fitting if they still flew the competitors to Iceland to compete, or it doesn't have to be Iceland, they flew them anywhere. The fact that they had this with their logo on the hangars with the planes for a LAN event, or for a online event, I should say, is kind of ironic. But anyways, that's a bit of a nitpick I just noticed now. Let's do a quick recap of how we got here. So this year, they scrapped the OCC format, which had been around since the very beginning of Kards Esports, and instead changed it to the expansion tournament format, which were 4 tournaments throughout the year. And you qualified to these tournaments through multiple preceding months, through multiple different ways that kind of changed as it went on throughout the year. So the first expansion, which was for the Blood and Iron expansion tournament, it was the top 12 players from December, top 12 players from January, and then the top 8 players from the tournament leaderboard for the month of January, made up the 32 players who then did a Swiss round down to top 8, and then those 8 players competed in a single elimination bracket, and then those top 3 players, on top of earning money, also qualified for the World Championship. So if that seems a little confusing, it really is. They also didn't announce this format until into January, so the people who qualified in December didn't even know they were qualifying for anything. All they had told us is that OCCs were over. And then in January, they told us, by the way, everyone who won in December is already qualified for this tournament. Absolute clan fiesta. And I will quickly mention my issue with this format, which is you only pay out to top 3, so the reward for getting top 3 in the actual expansion tournaments themselves is financial. You get there, and you get a hefty reward. However, something that they announced only in September, so after 3 of these expansion tournaments were over, and after 2 of the 3 periods of time to qualify for the next expansion tournament were over, in September, they announced, by the way, the top 3 from each of these tournaments will also go to the World Championship, which is now a closed event. And the way they announced it aside, my issue with this is you only get money for getting top 3, which obviously it takes a lot of skill to qualify for the Swiss, it takes skill to make it through the Swiss, and then it takes skill to end up in the top 3. Not taking that away from anybody, but it's also a single top 8 single elimination bracket best of 5, which has certainly room for skill expression, but it's also room for a lot of bad RNG, and you don't actually need a lot of bad RNG to not make it through, because there's only actually 4 tournaments, and in those 4 tournaments you have to be in the top 25% of the Swiss to make it to the knockout stage, and then in the knockout stage you have a 3 in 8 chance of getting money, and then also qualification to Worlds, which is where you compete for additional money. So basically, at most, the money is going out to 16 different people this year, which maybe that is the intention of this format, to limit the amount of people that 1939 has to pay, as it has been a consistent issue that 1939 has faced, the issue of successfully paying people on time and in full amounts. But anyways, so we had these 4 expansion tournaments that have all now taken place, and in each of these expansion tournaments, 3 players from each expansion tournament have moved on to the World Championship Top 16, so that's 12 players, and then the other 4 players are the players who got top 4 in last year's World Championship. So again, it's a situation of the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And, well, the poor in this case get absolutely nothing. So that is how it all worked, and then you can't really see it because I'm blocking it with my webcam, but it says World Championship 2025 in December up here. And then down here on this infographic they provided at the start of the year, it says the expansion tournament is already set for February 2026, so that would be the first season qualifying this month, November. I hope that they get rid of the expansion tournament format because it's terrible. But if they do, they should probably be announcing like what's replacing it, or if it's being replaced, or how is it changing, if it is changing at all, because currently people are incentivized to spend a lot of time climbing ladder this season, and if they spend a lot of time climbing in November, and then in January they announce, by the way, everyone who qualified in November and December get nothing because we're going back to like the OCC format or something like that, that would be another Clown Fiesta, and hopefully we can avoid the number of Clown Fiestas that has faced 1939's Kards Esports in this year. But let's move on to the 16 players. But first, I want to look, before looking at the actual 16 players themselves, I want to look at the 5 tournaments that they qualified to be in the top 16 through. Just a recap of who, sort of what happened. So this is the World Championship of 2024. So this is the World Championship from last year. And you can see the winner was Spoker over Gorky 3-2 in the finals. And then the other top 4 are Dandelion and Ozzy, also known as Princess or Princess Ozzy. So these are your top 4 from the World Championship: Spoker, Gorky, Dandelion, Ozzy. Now, if you have been keeping up to date on this channel and cards news in general, you will know that Gorky, who got 2nd in the World Championship, 1 game away from being our world champion, has been permanently banned. And I'm not going to go into why he was permanently banned. Again, I have a different video about that. But the TLDR is Gorky is permanently banned. And that has raised a question of, well, then who takes his spot? Because in a closed event, you need somebody to take his spot. So you need somebody from, presumably, this tournament. Now, something they could have done, especially foreseeing Gorky being permanently banned in February, giving them, I mean, what is that, like 9 months to figure something out? They could have done a open qualifier, where, you know, just do like a grand, like open Swiss-style tournament with the ultimate prize for first place is the 16th spot in the World Championship, and then at the very least you can be like, well, we had an open section to fill in Gorky's seat, but that is not what they did. Now, another solution they could have done would be to have a play-in with the 4 quarterfinalists from the previous World Championship. So the 4 players who got tied for 5th, so that would be Winner Will Win, Loser, HQT18, and Killswitch. They could have had those 4 do like a playoff match against each other, with the winner getting Gorky's spot. However, they did not choose to do that, partially might be influenced by the fact that HQT had already qualified through, I think, the first expansion tournament of the year. So that would be kind of confusing. Instead, they just gave the spot to Killswitch, because Killswitch lost to Gorky, and if you remove Gorky from the tournament, then it would have been Killswitch advancing on into the top 4. So that's the way they decided to do it. Now, Gorky did not cheat in any capacity, as far as I'm aware, in this tournament. So Gorky beat Killswitch fair and square. So this isn't Killswitch moving on because Gorky did something that like affected the result of their game. This is just Killswitch getting the lucky draw here, in that he played against Gorky, and then Gorky was later removed from the future event, so Killswitch inherits his spot. Now keep that in mind for later. Would I have done it this way? No, but that's how you get Killswitch in the top 16 alongside Spoker, Dandelion, and Ozzy. Now, these 4 players have been largely inactive throughout this year. Spoker had made it into one top 32 and played and then lost in the Swiss round. And then Dandelion made it into one top 32 and then didn't play. And then both Ozzy and Killswitch have not played in any of the tournaments throughout the year. So they have accepted their invites to play in the World Championship. That's confirmed, but I don't know how rusty they're going to be. And this is kind of an issue with inviting previous winners who have not played throughout the year, rather than basing it on a system of people qualifying throughout the year. And again, I have absolutely nothing against Killswitch. Ozzy is perfectly fine. And I'm not saying that these players shouldn't be in the top 16 and they shouldn't have a shot at being in the top 16 or they don't deserve being in the top 16. I'm just saying that this is a inherent flaw of the system of having a closed event with people qualifying from the previous year, because Ozzy and Killswitch did not play throughout the entire year. But anyways, moving on into the actual expansion tournaments themselves, the first one we had was Blood and Iron in February 2025. So, the end result of this tournament was HQT taking it 3-0 over 259, and we're just going to leave it at 259. And Pancake taking it over Nanami 3-2 in the bronze match. For HQT, 259 and Pancake to be your first three people entering the World Championship Top 16 through the expansion tournaments. Now, the rest of this tournament was perfectly fine in terms of the top 8 and the Swiss round. However, there was a bit of controversy because after the January season ended, which was the last season to qualify, a few days after they announced that 4 players were banned from qualifying for the event. Like, 4 players who had qualified were banned and removed, and then they took the next 4. And those 4 players, I again mentioned this previously, 66 Better, Gorky, Nuff, and Henry, all removed from qualifying. Now here, while doing research for this video, just like sort of putting things together in a spreadsheet, I realized that 1939 then actually screwed up with the, they screwed up with removing people and sort of like looking at who to take. Because the way that they announced that it would work is if you qualified in December, you qualified in December, and then if you qualified again in January, they would not count that, and they would take the next person who qualified in January because you had already qualified in December. Now, for the very first month, new system, a bit rusty, I found out that they actually made a reasonably sizable mistake here, where they qualified people in January first, and then went back into December and said, well, if you qualified in January, you can't qualify for December, and then they took the next people who qualified in December, and that's the same with removing the people. So, actually, there was 2 players who got invited to the tournament who should not have been invited, and there were 2 players who should have been invited to the tournament who were not invited. Now, I don't think that this would have had a substantial impact on the end result. One of the players who should have been invited, AKGZ, they never showed up again, and they didn't play throughout the year, so they likely wouldn't have made a big impact on the tournament. The other player who should have been invited was Spoker, and Spoker could have had a much more big impact on the tournament. However, Spoker already qualified through being the world champion. So that doesn't really necessarily impact the top 16 of the World Championship. And then the 2 players who got invited but shouldn't have, neither of them, one didn't even play and the other one bombed out in Swiss round. So it didn't necessarily have a big impact, but, it pretty substantial mistake for the expansion tournaments. But anyways, your top 3 from this one was HQT, 259, and Pancake, with Nanami missing out by a single game. We will come back to that. And then in the United Front expansion tournament, and this one was fought in April, I believe, the United Front expansion was won by Radish, absolutely dominated this tournament. It is hard to understate how hard Radish won this tournament. He went 5-0 in Swiss round, and then went 3-0, 3-0, 3-0 in the bracket for the absolute perfect run. He did, lose 2 games in the Swiss round. I think he had 2 2-1s, if I remember correctly. But just absolute dominance by Radish. Tweede Cargo qualified through by being second, and then in the 3rd place match, you had Ezem Tezem taking it over Ephonics. or Asimtasm, also known as Maudi, in the Discord, you might recognize. Now, this is your top three: Radish, Tweedakario, Asimtasm. Now, this tournament, unfortunately, also had issues because Asimtasm actually lost in the quarterfinals to Cerno. Now, after the game was played, it was found out that Cerno had been live streaming his game, and you're not allowed to live stream your game because it can't be determined if you were receiving suggestions or feedback or coaching from other people watching your game. So, because that couldn't be determined, Cerno was disqualified from the tournament, and then Asimtasm got to move on into the semifinals despite losing. Now, this one makes a lot more sense than the Killswitch replacing Gorkyu one, because Asimtasm actually lost to Cerno, and it's possible that Cerno got a competitive advantage against Asimtasm in the game that they played. But that is how Asimtasm got into the third place match, and ended third and booked his ticket to the top 16. So again, absolutely not trying to suggest that Asimtasm doesn't deserve to be in the top 16. However, it is just the reality that these expansion tournaments, the way they are set up, and especially the way that they reward getting into the top 16, they are full of problems and create a lot of drama in who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. Now, moving on to the Naval Warfare Tournament, this is the first one that is truly just, like, not problematic. It was won by SYS. Taboo coming second, and Psy coming third, narrowly beating Radish, again, in the fourth place match, for SYS, Taboo, and Psy to be the three players moving on from the Naval Warfare Tournament, which was played in July, I believe. And then the most recent tournament, that was just played in October, was, of course, the Air Supremacy Tournament. And the Air Supremacy Tournament was won by Grand Union, winning 3-1 over Radish once again. And then Hachiman coming third, and then Henry coming fourth, but Henry qualifying into the top 16 because Radish had already qualified. So Radish had already qualified, so therefore they ignore his spot and go down to fourth, which is Henry. And that's relatively straightforward. Again, kind of a weird situation caused by having the World Championship qualification through a tournament that pays its own money, because if this tournament didn't pay money, you could have just banned people who had already qualified from competing, or, you know, if it didn't assign your, if it wasn't the actual results themselves that give you the qualification spot, rather than, say, the sum total of your results, then we wouldn't be in this situation, but we are, so Henry moves in to the top 16 of the World Championship through the fourth seed. Now, this is where a lot of people might be a little confused if you look at just the top 16, because, one, you might be like, well, where's Gorkyu? The answer is Gorkyu is permanently banned, and that's why Killswitch is taking his place. And then the other question people might have is, where's Grand Union? So Grand Union is a player I'm not familiar with at all. I have not seen him in any other tournament prior to this event. Comes in, wins this tournament, books his ticket into the top 16 of World Championship, but he is not in the top 16 of World Championship, and from what I have heard, it is just because he declined to play. I don't know if he's busy on the weekend it's playing. I don't know if he can't commit the time to play it over, like, 2 days on a weekend. I don't know what it is, but Grand Union has forfeited his spot in the World Championship, so that means they will take the person in fourth. However, they're already taking the person in fourth because Radish also qualified to the World Championship. So they can't take the first or second seed here, so they have to take third and fourth and fifth. Now, the issue with taking fifth here is there are 4 players who tie for fifth. So who are those 4 players? Well, they're the 4 players down here in the black. It is Birdo Burrito, SYS, Lovejin, and Otto. Zin, I don't speak Chinese. So, of these 4 players, we already can count out SYS because SYS is already qualified. So that leaves Birdo Burrito, Lovejin, and Otto all lacking qualification to the World Championship, and all potentially being up for Grand Union's spot. Now, the thing that you might think, based on how Killswitch qualified, where Gorkyu was removed from the tournament, or Gorkyu's spot was forfeited, so they took the person who Gorkyu beat. Now, if they did that, they would just simply take Otto, because Grand Union beat Auto in the first round, so if Grand Union's not in the tournament, Auto would have advanced into the next round, and there he would have made top 4, and therefore would have gotten his spot in the top 16. Now, Auto, unfortunately, was not given his qualification spot, because that's not how they chose to do it. They chose to do it differently this time. Again, differently than how they did it the last 2 times. Now, you could argue with the case of Asymptotism with Cerno, it's because Cerno could have actually had an unfair advantage in the game, so therefore, like, you know, it makes more sense in that case. But again, in the Gorky game, Gorky didn't have an unfair advantage against Killswitch, but they took Killswitch. Grand Union didn't have an unfair advantage against Auto and just declined to play. However, Auto does not get this spot. So how else do they determine it? Well, it was decided that it would go to the person who has the most wins in the quarterfinals, since they all played best of 5s. And Auto only won once, so therefore Auto is out of contention. It goes to be between Bodo Burrito and Lovjin, who both won twice. Now, okay, they both won twice. How do you determine between these 2 players now? Well, again, you could just do what I've been saying and have them play an actual match against each other. This has been done before in Cards history, where you have a tournament where you need 1 person and you have 2 people, and then you have them play into each other. Or actually, there was a case where they had, like, 6 people and they needed 2 people or something like that. Like, this has happened before. There are things in place to have players play it out to determine who gets a single spot when a spot opens up. But that is not how they decided to do it. They instead decided to break this tie based on who had the higher Swiss round seed in the previous round of the tournament, which was Lovjin, who came in with seed 2, whereas Bodo Burrito came in with seed 8. So therefore, Lovjin is in the top 16 out of these players. So it is going to be Hachiman, Henry, and Lovjin, who all move on into the top 3 for the Air Supremacy tournament. And that leaves you with the following top 16 players of Spoker, Dandelion, Ozzy, Killswitch, HQT18, 259, Pancake, Radish, Tweetacargo, Azem2Zem, SYS, Taboo, Psy, Hachiman, Henry, and Lovjin. So now that we have our top 16, let's take a quick look at the format, because the format has been announced. So it's a $12,000 prize pool. This is the same as the last couple years. Here is the top 16 players. Now, this Saturday, so I believe this is going to be, I think it's Saturday. They haven't actually announced the official day. I just know it's this weekend. There's going to be a draw show to determine seeding, because these people all qualified through different events. It is kind of difficult to determine seeding, so they're just going to do a random draw show to determine seeding against about who goes against who. Now, I'm not a fan of randomly drawn seeding, but this is one of the few scenarios where I kind of understand it, because you had a stupid qualification system to get to this point that requires random seeding. So there's going to be a draw show for random seeding. Now, the actual format, it will be fought in a double elimination bracket, and it's going to be entirely best of 5s, 4 decks, 1 ban. So, on the bright side, they have brought back double elimination. Absolutely huge. All of the single elimination tournaments kind of sucked, and by all of them, I mean just last year, because they decided to do a single elimination bracket last year for absolutely no reason. So I'm very happy about a double elimination bracket. Now, best of 5 is understandable. You're not going to do a 16-person double elimination bracket in best of 7s. That would be way too much. But I did quite enjoy the best of 7 for the finalists in 2023, which is something that they did, where the top 4 all brought, I think it was that you brought 5 decks and you banned 2, or you brought 4 decks, banned 1, but then if you made it to the finals, you unlocked a 5th deck. I think it was 5 decks, banned 2. No, sorry. It was 4 decks, banned 1 until the finals, and then the finals was you played all 4 decks. It'd be really cool if they did that in the finals. It doesn't seem like that's what they're going to do. But then obviously there's going to be streaming and the and casting, and the tournament is going to be the prizes are going to be broken down into the same way that it's always broken down. First place gets $6,000 and the title of Cards World Champion. Unfortunately, this doesn't actually mean anything. Like, how many times throughout the year has it been mentioned anywhere that Spoker is the world champion? Basically none, unfortunately for Spoker. And all of this is going to be done on December 20th and 21st. So this is the format. General improvement, I would say, from last year. It's kind of difficult to not improve. Well, specifically, this stage of the tournament is an improvement from last year. They managed to ruin everything else, which is impressive because last year was a massive step down from the previous 4 years. But that being said, the format is fine. Pretty good. Now, they have the top 16 players, and each of them has a player card here with a tiny little blurb, as well as a couple fast stats about how they qualified, their most played nation, their least played nation, their win percentage. These, as far as I can tell, these stats are based on lifetime stats. These are not 2025 stats. And I kind of wonder if the reason they did this is because some of the people, like Spoker's played a lot of cards this year, Dandelion's played a decent amount of cards, I think Asia's played a decent amount of cards. I have no idea how much cards Killswitch has played. I think if they showed like stats for 2025, Killswitch would probably have under 1,000 games, maybe under 500 games. So they're showing lifetime stats here, and you know, a lot of these blurbs are kind of meaningless. It's very clear that, like, it almost feels like they asked AI to write it, and they asked an AI that has no understanding of who any of these people are or what their redeeming qualities are. They're deeply impersonal, and in a few cases are just, like, have silly mistakes in them. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to mention a few of the players who I think particularly stood out to me. Now, first of all, Spoku, he's the world champion. You know, he deserved his spot in the World Championship, and he deserves a spot to compete in the next year's World Championship. Does that mean directly qualifying to top 16? Personally, I don't agree with that. However, at the very least, if you're going to have a closed bracket, it makes sense to invite the previous World Champion. Some other players I want to note. Honestly, I think the heavy favorite in my mind for the World Championship title this year is Radish. Radish is an absolute monster, coming in with a 69% win rate, one of the highest, and absolutely just annihilated the United Front expansion tournament, and then placed in the top 4 for both of the following expansion tournaments after that, the Naval Warfare and the Air Supremacy tournaments. Radish just can't seem to lose. He won 2 of the 3 Swiss rounds he competed in. He actually qualified for all 4 expansion tournaments, but just didn't play in the first one. Radish is an absolute monster. I'm very, very impressed by him and his play. Then SYS, also very impressed by SYS, qualified to, I think, 3 of the 4 expansion tournaments. He got into the top 8 of 2 of the expansion tournaments. Obviously won one of them to qualify. And then Taboo, again, quite good player. I think he got into all 4 expansion tournaments throughout the year. Sai, another one where I certainly got into the top 8 of the first 3 expansion tournaments of the year before finally getting his spot. Yeah, so, you know, there's a few other names in here. But there's, you know, they're all just, like, fairly good players. Now, the thing I want to mention of being particularly funny here is Sai has a win rate of 69.2%. And you can go through, out of their own published win rates in this page, this is the highest one. There's 2 players with 69.1%, and then Sai has 69.2%. So this gives him the highest win rate. Now, if you actually read what 1939 wrote here, it says, boasting a 69.2% win rate, one of the highest of the year's finals. It's not one of the highest, it's the highest, and it took like 10 seconds to figure that out. Yeah, anyways, this is what I mean by, like, these are, like, very impersonal and kind of meaningless. It would have been nice to see something more written about that, but hopefully the casters will have more to say about them in the draw show. But anyways, these are the players who are qualified to the top 16. Now, I want to talk about some of the players who are not qualified to the top 16. And that is because there are some players who did really, really well throughout the year. Arguably, they did better on average throughout the year than some of the players in the top 16. And again, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not trying to say anybody in the top 16 now does not deserve to be there. They got there by doing well in a cards tournament. If you do well in a cards tournament, it means you are reasonably good at the game and deserve to compete in additional tournaments. Now, what I am saying is that there are some players who deserve to be in the top 16 who are not in the top 16 because of the way that they formatted just the way that they formatted this event. So I made a spreadsheet here that I'm now going to show and go through. This is just the data here. But basically, what I'm looking at here is this is if you applied. I went through and gathered all of the stats of all of the people who qualified throughout the year, and this is applying the OCC Ultimate format where you earn points for different placements throughout the year. Now this is customizable. This is right here is just the default of the OCC Ultimate. Now a quick rundown if you don't know what the Ultimate, where in the OCC Ultimate there were 3 OCC clashes. So there was a OCC clash every month, and you earned a certain amount of points based on how well you did in each OCC clash. And then the Ultimate was every 3 months, where they took the 8 players who earned the most points throughout the previous 3 tournaments and invited them into that closed top 8. So based on that, 1939 determined a point assignment for each of the ranks you could get, and I just simply applied that throughout all of the results we had throughout the year in the Swiss round and the expansion tournaments, and then basically used that as a method of determining who performed the best throughout the year. So these points are 25 for first, 18 for second, 15 for third, 12 points for fourth. If you get knocked out in the first round with the top 8, that's 8 points. And then if you just qualify, play in the Swiss round, you get 4 points. Now this qualified versus 9th to 32nd. This is qualified points is points for making it into like qualifying technically, whereas 9th to 32nd is points for actually playing in the Swiss round. In the OCC Ultimate, you had to play in the Swiss round to actually earn your points. And then over here, I just have additional columns for if you want to assign points based on winning seasons and winning Swiss rounds. So if you want to get like any additional points for being the person who 5-0s in Swiss, or being the person who gets first on the rank leaderboard for that season for your qualification. So if you look at this, the numbers up till here, this dark green one, these are 16 players. So these would be the 16 players who would qualify into the top 16 based on this format. And then there is slightly different gradients of green here. So this is for if you take the top 4 for the World Championship, all of these pale green ones. So these would be the top 16 players in the tournament, plus the 4 from the previous World Championship. Or sorry, the top 12 players throughout the year, plus leaving 4 spots open for the previous World Championship. And then this little gradient here is if you do the top 3 from the World Championship, not counting Gorky's spot, and then the top 13 throughout the year. Now, obviously, I know that this is a hypothetical, this is an exercise, but I think it is worth pointing out some players based on 1939's own point system from a couple years ago. You see that there are some players here who placed very high on points who are not qualified. So the names in yellow are players who are qualified to the real top 16. And then Grand Union here is in orange because they technically qualified and then chose not to play. So you see Nuff, Noan, Nanami, 66 better than Last Man Phonics, and then there's a couple other recognizable names down here. Birdo Burrito, UIOUUF. Also placed well throughout the year. Now, you can go through here if you change these around so you count people who qualify, because obviously if you know you get points for qualify, you're more likely to actually play in the qualifier. You see the names move around a little bit, but it does stay rather consistent. And then like if you throw in like an additional 4 points for winning a season and an additional 4 points for going 5-0 in the Swiss, you could see some other names showing up around here. Now, I'm not going to spend too long playing through with the spreadsheet, but basically the point of this spreadsheet is to show that there are some players who performed really, really well, and then some alternate formats where if you wanted to have a closed format, if you wanted to have a closed World Championship where you took the 16 best players of the year, or you took the 12 best players of the year plus the 4 finalists from the previous year, then you would actually end up with different names than the names that you did end up with. So this is basically just suggesting that, and then obviously you can change the totals for all of these, but I'm not going to change them. But this suggests that you are not getting the best active 16 players in the world. And actually, if you look at the 4 world champion, like if you look at the 4 people who got in through the World Championship, Spoker and Dandelion are down here with 4 points each. If you actually remove the points for qualifying but not playing, Dandelion would go down to 0 points. And then you don't even see Kill Switch or Aussie because they didn't earn any points in this format. They did not participate in Kards esports throughout the year at all. So, with that all being said, I want to do a quick I just basically want to quickly talk about some of the players who I think deserve honorable mentions for performing well throughout the year and deserve a little bit of attention that they otherwise would not get. So, this is basically just an order of how they appeared on the points list with one of the configurations. The order that they show up on this is not particularly important. So each of these players, I'm going to go through, I think there's 9 players, if I recall correctly, and each one I have listed their leaderboard placements. So this is how they placed in the top 20 on ladder and the top 10 on the tournament leaderboards for seasons that counted for qualification. And they're listed in how well they did downwards. They're not listed in chronological order. So, starting with Noen got 1st, 3rd, 2 4ths, and a 12th throughout the year. These are all through in like ladder leaderboards, through the ranked leaderboard. And then in the tournaments themselves, so this is in the Swiss round, Noen participated in all 4 expansion tournaments, where he got 4th, 17th, 25th, and 27th in the Swiss round. And that 4th, you could see, qualified him into the top 8, and in that top 8, he got 5th. So, because he did not get 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, Noen gets nothing. Noen does not get to go to the World Championship, despite the fact that Noen very clearly performed incredibly well throughout the year. Now, another player who was performed incredibly well throughout the year was Nuff. Nuff got a 1st, a 3rd, a 9th, and a 13th on ladder, a 2nd, 4th, and 19th in the 3 Swiss rounds he played in, and then in the 2 top 8s that he made, both of them he got 5th, which means no qualification to Worlds. Nanami got 2 7ths and an 8th, very, very efficiently qualifying for 3 different expansion tournaments, I might add. In those 3 expansion tournaments that he played in, he got 3rd, 12th, and 23rd, and in the top 8 that he played in, Nanami got 4th. I remember in the very first expansion tournament of the year, Nanami got 4th, lost 3-2, and because of that, Nanami gets absolutely nothing. 66 Better, one of the most recognizable names in esports of like the last year and a half, 2 years of Kards, got a 1st, a 2nd, a 4th, a 5th, a 14th, and a 19th. And within the 3 expansion tournaments that he played in, got 7th, 22nd, 27th. And then in the top 8 that he played in, got 5th. So therefore, 66 Better gets nothing. Continuing on. Last Man. Leaderboard placements of 2 seconds, a 6th, and an 8th. All of these done on the tournament leaderboards. Last Man is a tournament mode grinder, absolute beast. And then in the 3 expansion tournaments that he played in, got 6th, 15th, 16th, so actually placed in the top half of all 3 tournaments he played in. Only one of those did he make it into the top quarter for top 8, where he got 5th, so therefore Last Man gets absolutely nothing. And this one's really sad, because now, Noen, Nuff, Nanami, and 66 Better are all recognizable names. They have done well in tournaments. They have earned money from Kards. They have competed in previous World Championships and previous OCCs. Last Man is actually like a new and up-and-coming player of this year. Last Man is a player who thrived in the format of this year. Last Man is a player who embraced Kards throughout the year, playing in the different metas, performed really, really well, and gets absolutely no recognition for it. Then we have Ephonics, placing 9th and 11th to qualify for 2 different tournaments. And the 2 tournaments that he qualified for ended in the top half of both of them, 6th and 16th. And in the top 8 that he played in, got 4th. So Ephonics gets nothing. Now, moving on, we have Birdo Burrito. So Birdo got 1st, 10th, 12th, and 14th throughout the year. In the 2 expansion tournaments he played in, got 8th and 10th, so top 10 in both of them, and in the 1 top 8 that he played, got 5th, so Birdo gets nothing. Moving on. UIOUUF got 2nd and 4th throughout the year, and UIOUUF is a player who really started performing very, very well in the second half of the year. So again, another player who really hit their stride this year is not a big name in esports prior to this year, like the Last Man or Last Man. And again, really, really thrived. Even won a leaderboard season, a tournament leaderboard season with a first place, and with the second place. They won the Swiss round with a first place, and in the top 8, they got 5th. So, say it with me now, UIOUUF gets nothing. Now, here we get to some players who actually didn't make it into a single top 8, but again, going through the stats, they really deserve any recognition. These are players who have never appeared on an official Kards broadcast. So, starting with Free Lakai, throughout the year, Free Lakai got 4th, 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, 13th, 15th, and 2 19ths. So, Free Lakai, absolute ladder grinder. It qualified to 3 different expansion tournaments where he got 10th, 19th, and 24th. However, none of those are in the top 8, so therefore no top 8 placements, therefore no stream time, therefore no money, and no recognition for their work. Similarly, Igorov, throughout the year, has 2 third places, an 8th place, a 9th place, and a 13th place in 3 expansion tournaments. They got 10th, 18th, 24th, very, very similar to Free Lakai, and also, just like Free Lakai, no stream time, no recognition, no money, no qualification for the World Championship. And last but not least, you have this Chinese player who has never made it to stream, so they've never had an official English name given to them. I just threw this into Google Translate, and it came back with Lafiella, so I'll just call them Lafiella. Now, Lafiella, throughout the year, got 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 10th, qualifying to 3 expansion tournaments where they got 13th twice and 29th, again, leaving them with no top 8 placements, no money, no stream time, no recognition, and no qualification for the World Championship. All right, so what does this all mean? Well, I'm not going to go into it because I've gone into it already throughout this video. I've gone into this in other videos. Really, the point I'm trying to make, and hopefully the point that I have successfully highlighted with this video, with this slideshow, is that this format did a very poor job of highlighting who has performed best throughout the year. Now, this is not the only thing a World Championship is supposed to be doing. Now, all of the previous World Championships did not qualify in through a points-based system that you earned throughout the year. That is a suggestion I've made in the past, but that is not something that we have had in the past. In the past, it all comes down to a single tournament, and people who performed well throughout the year get to qualify in to a slightly deeper stage of the tournament, but to the 128 stage. So you did have players in the past who performed incredibly well throughout the year who were absent from the top 32, were absent from the top 16, or certainly absent from the top 4 of a World Championship. So I'm not saying that that is necessarily wrong, but the argument for that system is you have an open qualifier where anybody, regardless of their collection size, regardless of how well they have played throughout the year, regardless of when they started playing the game, regardless of how much time they have to grind ladder, which is the primary way to qualify for these events, you would have an open qualifier where on just a couple weekends, a brand new player at the game with a couple of well-played decks and well-crafted decks might make a deep run and potentially even make it into the top 4. And that gives you underdog stories, that gives you underdog runs, that introduces new players to competition. There are arguments for that system. There are arguments for a system that prioritizes just the best of the best. The system we have does neither. You are not getting the best, and also you are still restricting the World Championship to exclusively the grinders, who are able to put in hundreds of hours in any given season to qualify to these tournaments. And yeah, that's a shame. And I'm not going to repeat myself anymore on this, and that's aside from all of the mistakes throughout the year, the mistakes in the who gets sent invites to the tournaments, the mistakes in, or just like the questionable decisions in who gets to take spots from players who were removed from tournaments, and of course the absolute dropping of the ball of communicating anything to do with the format of this World Championship, or even the format of the expansion tournaments. So that just leaves me with one final message. 1939, please do better next year. Kards Esports needs it. Kards Esports deserves the attention to detail that makes a good scene. Kards Esports deserves a way of providing feedback and any sign that feedback is listened to from the players who participate in it, Kards Esports deserves a chance for the grinders and the skilled players to shine, as well as it deserves a place for newcomers to enter and make the climb and perform well. Kards Esports deserves so much, and I'm not going to go into any more detail. I'm just going to leave you on that. Please, 1939, do better. And that's going to be the end of this video. Let me know who your favorite is for winning World Championship. Are you going to be watching the World Championship? Are you excited for it? Are you more excited for it this year than last year? Are you less excited for it this year than last year? Let me know all of your thoughts about the World Championship down in the comments below. Join my Discord to continue the conversation over there. If you have the desire and the means to do so, please feel free to consider donating to me. Link in the description. And subscribe if you haven't already to catch more videos covering Kards competition, as well as Kards updates, balance patches, and expansions, and the occasional Kards gameplay that I might stream over on my Twitch. All that being said, I will catch all of y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.